Okay, chapter 4. Should just be a real quick one, and you don't necessarily have to get into any design file. We'll talk more about this later, but I want to throw this out kind of early in the training, and that is, one of the very first things here we talked about was the fact that there are 2D design files and then there's 3D design files. We talked about how you can be in a 2D and also see a 3D at the same time. Well, in addition to that, you should also know that with that 2D file type, that there is also, that file could also be a drawing file, a design file, or a sheets file. And they all have kind of their own use. And when we get into sheets especially, you're really going to see what I'm talking about. Now, for the most part in the past, you've probably only used design file. I don't know if these file types are necessarily new to ORD, but I'm not really aware of anybody that was ever using the other types in the past. And the reason why it becomes important in ORD is really it's the new sheeting method utilizes these different file types or model types, I guess you could call it. So let's just, real quick here, let me just talk about this. Okay, so if you look up at the top, 2D, so we're sitting in a design file. This should look very familiar. This is, what you're used to. And this happens to be the file that I'm going to set my sheets up in. And it's not like in the past where you had a separate layout file. In this case, the layout file is all part of the same. In fact, everything sheeting related is just in the same design file. So, in any case, I'm in the design file like you're familiar with. You see the sheet borders out there. We'll talk about later, how to make that happen. But let's go over to that Manage View Groups where we were in the past. And notice when I'm sitting in a Sheets file to where the sheets have already been set up, that now there's these other types of models also. And I was in the default model, which happens to be a design type. And I can see that over here. They've up at the top, or over on the far left-hand side of this models dialog that you've seen in the past, notice over on the left-hand side where it says type, there's a different icon for each one. And so the one at the top is the design file, then the ones in the middle here are drawing files, and then the ones at the bottom are sheets files. And the reason why this becomes important is because when you set up sheets, and we'll do this in a separate chapter, but you're going to go through drawing productions and name boundaries. You're going to go through this whole system, and then once you get your sheet boundaries the way you like, you're going to click a button that is going to automatically then create within this design file a drawing file and a sheets file. Now, I can hover over this first one, which is, you can see here in the tooltip, it's named Plan 1. I can switch to the Plan 1 view. Now that's a drawing file. And you can see in the drawing file that several different things are happening. The big one is that the references, that sheet border that you saw is like a live border. In the past with setting up sheets, you probably mostly just used a fence to define the borders. In this case, that name boundary is going to be like a physical name boundary that stays in place in that design file. You're also going to see that here in this drawing file. That's going to clip everything off right at that line. You can see even that curve data was kind of in the middle. It got clipped off, right? So that's a clip. But what's important about this view for you really is that all of your labeling is going to take place in the drawing file. In fact, I think at least some of the automatic labeling I think has to happen in the drawing type. I need to verify that. But regardless of if it only works here or not, this is the location where you're going to be doing all of your labeling, your your annotation of your plan view, and I'll show you the profile view, which is also stored in a separate drawing file. And then from there, we'll come back to this here in a second. Let me go to the sheets file now. And so now, seems a little confusing, but this sheets file really has nothing really in it because it has several things going on. And unlike the others where the other file types where we had our annotation set to 1 inch equals 20, or it's really a ratio is what it is, or 1 inch equals 50, whatever it is. In the sheets file, everything is a 1-to-1. So if I was to measure this, it's like, think of it like a hard sheet. I think it would measure 11 inches. Pretty sure. Let's check that real quick. Oh, feet 2.3. Okay, so it reads out in feet, not inches. But anyway, everything's reference to it. And when you do, anytime you do any of your printing, that's going to happen here. Now this isn't cleaned up or anything, but this is going to be very different. If you were to look at your references, you'll see that again our sheet borders are not cells. We're pointing to that work set we talked about earlier. And then you've got the plan view and the profile view, and that's in a separate reference. And all of these are nested. Again, we're going to come back to this, but because it's a little confusing, I kind of just want to throw that out early, and then we'll try to go into more detail later. But the new sheeting method is going to use something called live nesting, and you can see here it's set to 99. So basically what happens is for both the plan view and the profile view, it's referenced to that drawing, and then everything referenced to the drawing, it all comes through. It's like a reference of a reference of a reference to make this whole thing work. We can still move around the grid. That's another difference. The profile now has a grid built into the part of the annotation. And I don't want to go too far with this because we're going to cover it later. But mainly for now, really all I want you to know as part of this chapter is that there's design files, drawing files, and sheets files. And well, here's the profile view also. And so you can see that the profile view is also, this is also where you do your labeling. So, this is all annotation, and we can do some of this auto annotation, smart annotation, so to speak, or, regular text, all those kinds of things. That's all going to happen right here at this location, which, as you know, is very different than Power Geopack was, but it actually works very well. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap it up there, because that's really all I wanted to cover. Remember, design file, drawing file, sheet file. That's it.